success of this office is also a testament to the professionals on the National Archives leadership team who have provided sound guidance and support. And I want to especially thank Deb Wall, my Deputy Archivist Jay Basanko, our Chief Operating Officer Gary Stern, the agency's General Counsel, and Jay Traynor, our Executive for Agency Services, for their support. In its latest update to the Federal Freedom of Information Act, which was signed into law in June of 2016, Congress expanded OGIS's dispute resolution role in the FOIA process and strengthened the office's mandate to review policies and procedures and identify methods to improve compliance. Before I turn the program over to Alina, I want to recognize Jason R. Barron. Jason R. Barron. Jason spent many years at the National Archives as Director of Litigation and as an expert on the preservation of electronic records. So thanks. Welcome home, Jason. Thank you all for joining us today to hear about OGIS's reports and reviews, and we look forward to hearing and reading the comments you submit. And I'll now turn the program to Alina Simo to provide an update on OGIS's activities during this past fiscal year. Alina.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today, and thanks everyone for getting up early. I'm not a morning person, so this is quite a feat for me to be here this early as well. This is our first annual open meeting, and we're very excited you could all come. We're going to try to stay on schedule today, even though we got started a few minutes late. We have a very full day today. And I hope those of you who are willing to stick around, at 10 a.m. we're going to start our FOIA Advisory Committee meeting. We also welcome you to stay for that. So last year, Congress amended FOIA to add a new requirement for OGIS to conduct an annual meeting that is open to the public on the review and reports of our office, and to allow interested persons to appear and present oral or written statements at the meeting. So, as I said, this is our first annual meeting, and we are very pleased that Congress has given us yet another avenue to showcase all the great work that OGIS has been doing. And I'm very much looking forward to providing you with an update on OGIS's work, and this past fiscal year in particular, and afterwards there'll be time for comments. Please note that we are broadcasting this meeting via National Archives' YouTube channel, and we will also have a transcript of this meeting. If you are unable to join us in person, please feel free to submit your written comments to our website, ogis@nara.gov, at any time following the meeting. So, fiscal year 2016 in review, and I forgot to mention, we have our annual report, Exhibit A, out on the tables. We're very happy to have put that out this year. I'm sure all of you here have already memorized it. If not, there will be a quiz. Before I launch into our overview, I want to take a minute to recognize the amazing OGIS staff, without whom none of this could be possible. And I'm going to ask them to stand up and embarrass themselves for 1 second. First, Deputy Director Nikki Gramian. Thank you, Nikki. It's Nikki. We have our new attorney advisor, Sheila Portanovo. Our compliance team member, Amy Bennett. She's also our DFO for the FOIA Advisory Committee. Our mediation team facilitator, Krista Lemelin. And you can say a virtual hello to our mediation team lead, Carrie McGuire, who's watching us on YouTube. So hi, Carrie. We should start off by mentioning what undeniably was the biggest change for OGIS during fiscal year 2016, and that was the passage of the FOIA Improvement Act of 2016. Those amendments expanded OGIS's role in providing dispute resolution throughout the FOIA process and reinforced our mandate to review policies and procedures and identify strategies to improve compliance. As you will likely notice at a few different points during my presentation today, the 2016 amendments have had a significant effect on the volume of OGIS's work. Today, and tracking our annual report, I will provide an overview of fiscal year 2016 outreach and collaboration efforts, our dispute resolution program, and our compliance programs, and recommendations that we have made in our annual report. So outreach and collaboration. As part of our outreach and collaboration efforts, OGIS continue to support the National Archives leadership in open government by taking steps to fulfill our concrete commitments to recognize and modernize the administration of FOIA. The current U.S. Open Government National Action Plan, NAP 4.0, gave OGIS 2 specific responsibilities out of the total of 5 commitments that relate to FOIA. The plan was developed and published as part of the United States involvement in the International Open Government Partnership. First, the National Archives was tasked to increase understanding of FOIA by developing educational resources to teach the next generation about FOIA. To accomplish this, we worked with education experts at the National Archives to create an infographic that explains the purpose of FOIA and gives a broad outline of the process. This infographic has been integrated into lesson materials posted on the National Archives Docs Teach website. As part of the lesson, students are asked to think about how agency records relate to FOIA and how they affect our understanding of historical events like Bloody Sunday and Selma, and whether they think the fact documents that could be released might change the government's actions. Second, we are continuing work with the Office of Information Policy at the Department of Justice to meet a commitment to improve agencies' FOIA web pages. Another notable outreach effort we launched during fiscal year 2016 was our first Sunshine Week event right here in the McGowan Theater. In recognition of the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Freedom of Information Statute, we were able to display the original FOIA statute signed by President Johnson right here at NARA. We were particularly honored to have Senator Patrick Leahy join us to give us the event's keynote address. And we very much appreciated being able to have thought leaders like Chief Technology Officer Megan Smith, the Kennedy School of Government's Archon Fung, and American University's Andrew Lee right here in McGowan to share their thoughts on the future challenges and opportunities for open government. We also hosted panel discussions looking at innovation from inside and outside of government. The event was so successful that we have decided to try to make it an annual event. The most notable impact of the FOIA Improvement Act of 2016 was on OGIS's dispute resolution program. The 2016 amendments now require agencies to alert requesters to OGIS's dispute resolution services much earlier in the FOIA process, prior to or during the pendency of an administrative appeal, in addition to at the conclusion of the administrative process. As you can see from these graphs, we experienced an immediate and substantial increase in our caseload. The implementation of the amendments led to a 142% increase in requests for assistance in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2016, compared to the number of cases we received during the entire 2015 fiscal year. The surge in demand for our services has continued since the reporting period, and right now, we are on course to quadruple our caseload in fiscal year 2017 compared to fiscal year 2016. In reviewing the cases that are now coming into OGIS, we have noticed some confusion among requesters as to our role in the FOIA process vis-a-vis agency FOIA public liaisons, and questions about the types of assistance that OGIS can provide. To help clear up some of this confusion, we have created a new 2-page handout that describes who we are and what we do. Copies are available right outside on the table, along with the annual report. The handout also includes a chart that describes who we are, the kinds of assistance we can provide versus the assistance FOIA public liaisons are able to provide at various points in the administrative FOIA process. You can also find the handout in our OGIS toolbox in the resources section of our website, And feel free to help yourself to a copy and hand them out to friends and colleagues. Since March 2010, OGIS has offered free dispute resolution skills training for FOIA professionals, which has been uniformly met with high praise from all participants. We offer a day-long training session here at the National Archives twice each year. We just had our most recent session 2 days ago, very well attended, and again, a great success. We also provide tailored training for agencies upon request. During the past fiscal year, 33 FOIA professionals from 12 agencies, I just bumped up the number, and departments participated in our day-long training session. OGIS also provided agency training specifically to FOIA employees at the National Labor Relations Board and taught a session on effective communication skills at the Department of Labor FOIA training session. In total, from fiscal year 2011 to fiscal year 2016, OGIS has provided this training to 750 professionals in nearly 60 agencies. Our compliance program continued to mature during fiscal year 2016. OGIS issued agency assessments for 3 DHS components: the Transportation and Security Administration, TSA, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, and the United States Secret Service. Our agency assessment program is based on the knowledge that successful FOIA programs have 3 main factors in common. 1, they are well managed. 2, they use technology effectively. And 3, the FOIA staff communicates well with the requester community. During an agency assessment, we document a FOIA program's management practices, use of technology and communication, and make recommendations for improvement. Our fiscal year 2016 assessments continue to show the importance of strong management practices and leadership support to a program's success. Our CBP assessment in particular demonstrated how these 2 factors contributed to CBP's ability to reduce its backlog by 74% in fiscal year 2015. Adopting our management recommendations also helped TSA reduce its backlog in 4 months after their adoption. In the area of technology, we documented the importance of finding the right technology to meet the program's needs. So for example, CBP credited its move to FOIA Online with helping it to better manage its high volume of requests. And at the Secret Service, on the other hand, we documented issues with the agency's FOIA processing and tracking system that were so severe that processors sometimes reverted to using tape to hand redact documents. We also noted the importance of teaching FOIA staff how to use technology properly. Communicating with requesters continues to be a low-cost way to improve a FOIA program's performance. OGIS found that a lack of response from the agency continued to be a factor in most of the lawsuits filed against the FOIA programs we reviewed. In fiscal year 2016, we also published our first government-wide issue assessment. This assessment looked at the use of still interested letters to administratively close FOIA requests. We issued reports and recommendations on the subject based on a review of historical data and in-depth interviews with selected FOIA programs. During this review, we noted that available data shows that relatively few requests are closed using still interested letters, but that the data does not capture requesters' frustration with that practice. We also noted a lack of transparency with use of these letters and made recommendations to address this issue. As I noted just a few minutes earlier, our agency assessments include recommendations to strengthen the FOIA program. 120 days after we publish our assessment report, we follow up with the agency to learn what steps they have taken to respond to our recommendations. Agencies are given 60 days to respond to that inquiry, and after we've received their responses, we evaluate their answers to our recommendations and close out recommendations that agencies have indeed addressed. During fiscal year 2016, agencies addressed approximately 97% of our recommendations. I am also happy to report that since the end of the reporting period and after we had published our report, we received a response from the Secret Service, and next year I anticipate that all of the circles shown here will be checked off. Our fiscal year 2016 annual report includes one regulatory recommendation, which is based on the work of the 2014-2016 FOIA Advisory Committee. The FOIA Advisory Committee was launched by the National Archives in 2014 to bring together FOIA experts both inside and outside of government to collaboratively develop recommendations to improve the administration of FOIA. During its first term, the FOIA Advisory Committee addressed proactive disclosure, oversight and accountability, and fees. Based on the suggestion of the Fees Subcommittee, the FOIA Advisory Committee unanimously approved a recommendation to the Archivist of the United States that the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, update its 1987 fee guidelines. The Archivist submitted that recommendation to OMB in August of 2016. In 2016, the Archivist also renewed the FOIA Advisory Committee's charter for another 2-year term through 2018. And again, as I stated earlier, if you're interested in learning more about the FOIA Advisory Committee, I encourage all of you to stay. At 10 a.m., we're going to begin our quarterly meeting. We will also be live streaming that meeting as well on the YouTube channel, and you may also visit our website for committee-related documents and additional information. So before I move to any public statements, I want to mention some noteworthy events and dates that are coming up for us in the near future. First, and that affects all of us at my staff, is our physical move in early May. We're moving one building over from 800 North Capitol Street to 725 North Capitol Street, Northwest. It's the GPO building. While we do hope there will be minimal disruptions to our operations, please be patient with us as we will be busy packing up the week of May 1st and unpacking and settling into our new home in the GPO building the week of May 8th. We also hope that as of May 15th, our website address will be changing so that we are part of the www.archives.gov family. Please keep an eye out for a blog post that will be giving you a preview of our new look and feel of our website and explain how to update any bookmarks you have for OGIS's web pages. Together with the Office of Information and Policy at DOJ, we are exploring dates for the next Chief FOIA Officer Council meeting. OGIS and OIP co-chair that council as a result of the 2016 FOIA Improvement Act amendments. As soon as we have a confirmed date and time, we will add that information to our website as well. You can also keep up with announcements like the date of the next Chief FOIA Officer meeting and future advisory committee meetings by reading our weekly blogs and following us on Twitter. So we're almost ready to open up the audience for any statements. Please feel free to go ahead and move to no microphones that would normally be there and provide your statements. We very much appreciate your interest in and support of OGIS's work. With that, I hope we will be able to get some microphones and be able to hear from the floor for any public comments. We can use those microphones. Thank you for your help.
I am being defeated by technology. Good morning.
Good morning. If you could please state your name and your affiliation, that would be great. And thank you for your help with the AV equipment.
I think I got in the way more than I helped. My name is Kel McClanahan. I am with National Security Counselors, and I was wanting to know what the plans were now that you have such a large increase in your workload. Is the archivist or anyone going to put in a commensurate increase in your budget?
Great question. As you know, the whole government has been under a hiring freeze that was recently only lifted in spirit. At the National Archives, we are continuing to abide by the hiring freeze. I know the archivist is very committed to supporting OGIS and had previously given us permission to hire an additional employee for the mediation team, and actually two additional mediation team members, as well as one compliance team member. But unfortunately, the hiring freeze has put all of our great plans on hold. We are very happy to be able to welcome a detail lead to our office. I'm going to make her stand up. Jill Hudson is here. She just started with us this week. We're trying to look in-house for resources that we can use to try to bring our backlog down. We also are happy to welcome two law clerks that are starting next month, who will be with us for the summer and will also be assisting us with our backlog. So we're doing the best we can with what resources we have internally.
All right. Oh, whoops. Let me try the steps. No, you got hindered by technology. I'm hindered by the steps. My name is Rick Bloom, and I'm director of something called the News Media for Open Government. We used to be called the Sunshine in Government Initiative. And I wanted to first thank you for having this annual meeting. And in some ways, it seems a little redundant given OGIS's outreach to the public historically, and I know that that outreach will continue. There's been a lot of opportunities to talk through some of the challenges and some of the issues and some of the plans that OGIS has undertaken. So I want to appreciate that, acknowledge that, and very much appreciate that. It's also important to acknowledge, from our view, the support that the office receives from the archivist, whether it's moving from College Park to a place a lot closer to agencies. Now you're moving again, but the support that you all receive is vital. We were part of the effort to encourage Congress to broaden your mandate. And I think that the demand increase that you're seeing is not really a surprise, but it's part of the effort to put in place that broadened mission and scope and role for the office, because we do see it as a feedback loop. I think the other thing to mention from our perspective is you have a mandate to be more assertive and more independent in the recommendations, in the programs, in the work that you're doing. And I think that comes to play with the advisory opinions. I think the mandate requires reporting on the number of advisory opinions issued. That's also just sort of a marker for a more assertive role when agencies are improperly denying requesters. So I think it's important just to keep in mind, in our view, this is an office that's an agent of change. And so as we go along and as you're making decisions about your regulations, final determinations, whether they're confidential or not, which we strongly think they should be public, that's really the role that we see for the office. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Adam Marshall. I'm the Knight Foundation litigation attorney at the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. We're a nonprofit association of reporters and editors based here in Washington, D.C. I certainly, like Rick, appreciate the opportunity to comment today at OGIS's first annual public meeting. The Reporters Committee has long supported the creation and mission of an ombudsman office to assist reporters and others with requests made under the FOIA. As a member of the Sunshine in Government Initiative, the Reporters Committee was involved in the discussions that helped lay the foundation for OGIS's creation. And attorneys at the Reporters Committee have used OGIS's services when representing journalists in FOIA matters, and we regularly inform representatives of the news media about OGIS through our publications, our legal hotline, and our educational events. The Reporters Committee firmly believes that a robust, independent, and assertive FOIA ombudsman benefits requesters and agencies alike. We are concerned, however, by some aspects of the recently proposed regulations that will govern OGIS's activities and operations. For example, the draft rule published last December only addresses one of OGIS's statutorily defined activities, its role in dispute mediation. While we certainly appreciate the importance of these mediation services, we know that many journalists have used them in the FOIA process. However, OGIS is also tasked with a number of other important roles, including reviewing agencies' FOIA policies and procedures, making recommendations to Congress, and issuing advisory opinions. OGIS's proposed regulation does not address any of these other duties, which is perplexing given that it has been operating for years and is already conducting many of these activities. The reports and other investigations that OGIS has been providing to the public, like that on Still Interested letters, are of great use to both the public and agencies, and OGIS's regulations should reflect those efforts. We are particularly concerned by the absence of any regulations concerning OGIS's authority to issue advisory opinions. Despite a clear directive from Congress empowering OGIS to write advisory opinions, it has yet to issue a single one in its many years of existence. OGIS can and should issue advisory opinions to assist requesters and agencies in the FOIA process. There are numerous examples of how advisory opinions work in the state public records regimes, where they provide important guidance and support for requesters and agencies alike. The public has not been given any explanation as to why OGIS is not fulfilling this important function at the federal level when Congress has made clear that it should. The Reporters Committee is also troubled by a number of provisions in OGIS's proposed regulations that seek to impose secrecy on requesters who use its mediation services. For example, the rule states that OGIS's final response letters are confidential and cannot be used by any party or rely on them in any subsequent proceedings. Not only is there no legal basis for this provision, but it is contrary to OGIS's mission and will limit its usefulness to requesters who often contact OGIS in an effort to work with the agency to resolve their dispute before litigation. If those efforts are unsuccessful, it is important that the requester be able to inform the court that they attempted to resolve the dispute through mediation and were unsuccessful, as well as any advisory opinions or other determination that OGIS has made. OGIS should not be attempting to limit the disclosure of this important information. OGIS occupies a unique and important place in the FOIA process. In a sea of confusing rules, policies, and practices, it can and should be a guiding voice. The Reporters Committee is deeply committed to OGIS's success, especially for the reporters and journalists who need its assistance to inform the public on the operations of the federal government. We appreciate your consideration of these comments. We're happy to follow up with you as necessary. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Jason Barron at Drinker, Biddle, and Reith, and formerly a Director of Litigation in the General Counsel's Office at the National Archives. I didn't come here with prepared remarks. I'm happy to supplement my remarks with a written statement. Under the leadership of David Ferriero in 2012 and 2011, NARA was very much involved with President Obama issuing a memorandum to the executive branch and following with a managing government records directive issued in August 2012 that mandated that by December 31, 2016, agencies would preserve email in electronic form. My understanding is that NARA is collecting reports from agencies on that, how they have fared and how they have done with that directive. I would like to suggest that OGIS and also the FOIA Advisory Board consider the impact of that directive and that deadline, as well as NARA's policies with respect to capstone on the FOIA process. I would very much be interested in your baking into every interaction with agencies that are processing FOIAs questions about email and about how they are storing email and searching email with respect to FOIA requests. And I would suggest it's within the scope of OGIS's mandate to improve FOIA by linking together the ability of agencies' efforts to comply with that deadline and to implement Capstone as an email archiving scheme, integrate it into a better FOIA process to streamline the response time and do a better job in responding to FOIA requests that particularly involve email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Sean Moulton with the Project on Government Oversight. I had a few comments and a few questions, so I'll try and put them in some sort of order. In terms of I too am concerned about the increased workload you're getting in dispute resolution, and one suggestion, in addition to the detailee that you have, is that might be useful, is to offer a more extended sort of training program to agencies where they would send over detailees for a period of time who would get more long-term training in dispute resolution, be able to take that back, but while they're at OGIS, they could also be helping bring down the backlog that you're experiencing, and then we might see some benefits as they go back to their agencies with a better appreciation on how to resolve disputes without going to OGIS. But what I really wanted to talk about was the compliance program, which I think has been pretty impressive. The agencies that you remarked on and the progress they've made and the number of recommendations that they seem to be implementing is impressive as well. So I know OGIS has been working on some self-assessment materials as well for agencies because you're limited in how many agencies you can get to. And I'm wondering if those materials are going to be updated based on, as you get more experience and a better baseline of recommendations and issues that you're seeing at agencies, to upgrade those self-assessment materials so we might see some of the benefits, again, sort of ripple out to other agencies. And I'm curious how many agencies you think you'll be able to get to in fiscal year 2017, and whether or not we're going to have to see a drop to some extent in compliance work in order to shore up some of the workload in the dispute resolution.
Sean, thank you for that question. Great question, and something we're always thinking about as well. Maybe I'll take the tail end of your question first to tell you that this year our compliance team is working on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau currently. They're doing assessment of that FOIA program. And the other one on deck is the United States Postal Service. So we're hoping to finish those up this fiscal year, 2017. At the very tail end of the fiscal year 2016, but it's going to spill over into fiscal year, it's going to spill over into fiscal year 2018. We're going to start U.S.CIS. At their invitation, they invited us to go out and take a look at their FOIA program. So certainly we're trying to continue to follow and continue our compliance program in a strong and robust way. It's not our intent to try to slow down. We're also evaluating whether we could do another global kind of assessment that is more general in nature as opposed to agency specific. So even though we've actually asked our compliance team members to take an all-hands-on-deck approach, and they've started pitching in as well with our mediation caseload, they're still very committed to the compliance program, and we continue that work very much. We are continuing to comment on agency regulations as they're coming out. They've kind of slowed down. There was a huge inflow at the beginning, and now I think they've really kind of stopped. We also continue to monitor and write compliance types of letters to agencies whom we observe are not writing very clear letters to requesters. That's one of the issues that we're seeing a theme in right now. So to that extent, we're certainly continuing our compliance efforts.
So I did have a follow-up question, sure. And maybe it's too early in the process, but I'd be curious as to whether or not, since you're getting a lot of dispute resolution requests, do you see fewer dispute resolutions requests coming from agencies that you've done these in-depth compliance work? I mean, are they getting sort of a better rate of satisfaction with their requesters?
So I'm looking over to my Deputy Director, Nikki Gramian, who's nodding yes, I would say. I can't tell you, we've done an analytic study of it,
Right.
but I think the trend seems to be going in the right direction.
Terrific. That hopefully that's a good selling point to agencies.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, I don't see anyone else standing up and running to the microphone, so I thank you very much for your time and attention today, and we're always welcoming new comments about how we can improve our open meeting, which we're going to try to do annually. And if you have any comments about how next year should be, if we should do anything differently or the same, please let us know. And with that, I conclude our first open meeting. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm David Ferriero, the Archivist of the United States, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here this morning to the William G. McGowan Theater in the National Archives Building in Washington, D.C. Whether you're here in the theater or watching us on our YouTube channel, we're pleased that you could join us for the Freedom of Information Act Advisory Committee meeting. Today's meeting is close to the halfway point of this committee's 2-year term, and I welcome our committee members and thank you for your efforts thus far. I appointed you in recognition of your expertise and the range of viewpoints that you bring to this work. As a member of this committee, you have a critical role in improving our understanding of the greatest challenges to the implementation of FOIA and collaboratively developing recommendations to address these challenges. The purpose of today's meeting is for the subcommittees to provide updates for the committee and the public on their work to date. This committee chose to address 3 important issues during their term: proactive disclosure, search, and efficiency in resources. These topics reflect the profound changes technology has made to the way government operates and the public's expectations for openness. These are critical components to charting a course for how FOIA should operate in the future. I look forward to reviewing your final report and recommendations. Before I turn the program over to OGIS Director Alina Simo to begin today's meeting, I want to recognize her and her staff for providing this committee with leadership and administrative support. I would also like to thank today's guest speaker, Doug Hibbert from the Department of Justice, and to note that we are joined today by Jason Barron. Jason, most of you know, spent many years here at the National Archives as Director of Litigation and is an expert on the preservation of electronic documents. I'll now turn the program over to Alina to begin today.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us at today's meeting of the Federal FOIA Advisory Committee. As the Director of OGIS and this committee chair, it is my pleasure to welcome you all, and some of you again, to the National Archives and Records Administration in the McGowan Theater. This is our 4th quarterly meeting of the committee's 2016-2018 term, if you can believe it, which means we're about halfway through, so we're doing great. As most of you know, and as the archivist has already mentioned, the committee brings together government and non-government FOIA experts with vast and diverse experience to advise on and make recommendations to improve FOIA administration throughout the executive branch. I first want to say again how much I very much appreciate all the work that all the committee members have been devoting thus far. The work on the subcommittees has been very diligent and very eager to hear about their reports today. And again, OGIS looks very much forward to continuing to help support you. Our DFO, Amy Bennett, is here today, and she has been instrumental in moving things along, so thank you, Amy. I'm going to go through some basic housekeeping rules in 1 minute, review our general agenda, and set some expectations for today's meeting. First, though, we will spend a few minutes introducing the committee members participating in the meeting via telephone and those who are sitting at the table today. We will begin with the members I understand are participating via telephone. We might have a problem with the telephones. There are 3 committee members, actually I apologize, 4 committee members who are expected to participate by telephone. When Amy tells me that they're able to listen in.
To speak, yeah.
To speak. But Nate Jones is supposed to be joining us by telephone, Margaret Quokka, Jim Hirschberg, and Raynell Lazier. That's right. And I'm not sure about Mitra. Hopefully she will come. Whenever they're able to speak, we'll plug them in. But why don't we go ahead and introduce everyone at the table. I'll start with Ginger on my right, if you could just go around, please, and introduce yourself and remind everyone of your profession and affiliation.
Ginger McCall, I'm an attorney at the Department of Labor.
Chris Knox, I'm Managing Director of Discovery for Deloitte.
Sarah Kotler, I'm the FOIA officer at the FDA.
Lynn Walsh, National President of the Society of Professional Journalists. I'm James Valvo, Counsel and Senior Policy Advisor, Cause of Action Institute.
Tom Sussman, Director of Governmental Affairs for the American Bar Association.
Melanie Pastay, the Director of Office of Information Policy at Justice.
Michael Bekesha, an attorney at Judicial Watch.
Stephanie Carr, FOIA Officer at the Office of Secretary of Defense Joint Staff.
And I'm Jill Eggleston. I'm the FOIA Officer for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services.
David Pritzker, Deputy General Counsel of the Administrative Conference of the United States.
Logan Perel, I'm an attorney at the Department of Treasury.
Sean Moulton, Open Government Program Manager at the Project on Government Oversight.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to remind everyone, I was remiss in doing that last time. When you do speak, try to remember to identify yourself, so it helps us keep more accurate track of our meeting minutes, makes Amy's job a little bit easier. There will be a slight delay between the time when we finally do hear the members on the phone speak, hopefully that will happen soon, and when the microphones are turned back on, so just keep that in mind. This ensures that the live stream captures all the audio. So let me go into some administrative notes. This committee provides a forum for public discussion of FOIA issues and offers members of the public for the opportunity to weigh in regarding the administration of FOIA and to provide ideas for improving the FOIA process. We do encourage the public to share their written comments and suggestions with the committee. Also, to learn more about the submitting public comments to the committee, please visit our current website at otis.archives.gov. And as I mentioned in our previous meeting at 9 a.m., we're actually switching to the NARA family website. So we'll be at archives.gov/OGIS, but we will keep you posted on details. At the end of the meeting, we will have the opportunity for public comments, and we look forward to hearing from non-committee members who have thoughts or comments to share. And we are very pleased to see so many of you with an interest in FOIA here today in the McGowan Theater, and we welcome your feedback. To promote openness, transparency, and public engagement, we post committee updates and information to our website, our blog, and on Twitter at FOIA_ombuds. The URLs to these sites are on the slides behind me, supposedly. Yes, they are. Stay up to date on the latest OGIS and FOIA Advisory Committee news, activities, and events by following us on Twitter. We're trying to improve our Twitter followers, so please join us. Information about the committee, including members' biographies, committee documents, and public comments are also available on the OGIS website. As I mentioned earlier, we are live streaming this meeting. We will make the video, transcript, and meeting materials available on the committee's webpage as soon as possible. If you could bear with us, we will try to have it up within approximately 30 days. And we thank you in advance for your patience and understanding. We do plan to take a 15-minute break halfway through our meeting at approximately 11:45 a.m. Last time, I seem to have run a very efficient meeting, so we were ahead of schedule. My hope is perhaps we can do the same today. During the break, you may wish to purchase food or drink from the Charters Cafe, which I hope is going to be open, located on this level. As a reminder, there's no food or drink allowed in the theater. And please note, there are restrooms directly outside of the theater and another set downstairs near the cafe. Okay, so I want to move on to approval of our January 26, 2017 meeting minutes. I want to turn our attention to that, and I am advised that the committee members have all had a chance to review them, and all comments have been received and incorporated. I have certified the minutes. So I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes have been approved and will be available for public inspection on the committee's website. Thank you. So I'm excited to hear from each of the committee's 3 subcommittees today, proactive disclosure, searches, and efficiencies and resources. As we move through today's discussion, just a reminder, it's never too late to sign up for another subcommittee. This is a reminder to the committee members. They'll still welcome you with open arms. We will have one presentation today from Doug Hibbert from the Department of Justice, Office of Information Policy, and then we will open up the floor to discussion after each subcommittee presentation to committee members. So our first item on the agenda is an update from the Proactive Disclosures and Accessibility Subcommittee. I want to turn the meeting over now to co-chair Sarah Kotler and Margaret Kwoka, who's supposed to be on the telephone, to provide us with any updates and tell us about your activities and lead any discussion.
Sure, thank you. This is
Thank
Sarah
you.
Kotler from the FDA. Since it seems that Margaret's not available,
Thank you.
I will step in and give that update that she was planning to give. The group has been busy, as I think we described at our last meeting. Our plan was to talk with FOIA officers at a handful of agencies of different size and different types of FOIA requests to see what those agencies were doing along the lines of proactive posting. And we have already made a lot of progress in those discussions. We have talked already with several of those agencies. In a few other cases, we have appointments set up, but we weren't able to complete them in time for this meeting. And there may be one or two where we're still trying to come up with a time to meet with those groups. The conversations have been very enlightening, and we've covered a lot, including things like compliance with Section 508, the Americans with Disabilities Act, how these agencies are using technology, how these agencies are determining what should or should not be proactively posted. At this time, since our discussions aren't complete and we still have some meetings left to hold and some agencies to reach out to, we're not in a position to give any conclusions at this point, but perhaps by the time of our next meeting, all of those meetings should certainly be complete, and we can give a more detailed update at that time.
Okay. I'm just checking in. Amy, no one on the telephone. They can hear us? They can't hear us. Okay, I just wondered if... Okay, so...
Well, then Margaret can't say I said anything wrong.
Right, that's what I was thinking as well. Is there anything that you think she might have also added that you didn't include in your report?
Not that I can think of, but there are other subcommittee members here, so if any of them wants to chime in, I'm more than happy to be reminded of anything I may have forgotten.
Thank you.
So this is Sean Moulton, I'm on the subcommittee. The one thing I would say, and I don't want to draw a conclusion from it, as Sarah's saying, you know, we want to talk to more agencies, but I think one of the, certainly one of the more interesting things we've heard from some of the agencies when it comes to 508 compliance and the potential tension that it poses for a robust proactive disclosure is that some agencies have simply sidestepped 508 compliance and created more of a waiver process by which they're able to then be very proactive in posting materials with instructions and understanding that if someone needs a 508 compliant version of any of the documents they're posting through that process, then they would make that available as soon as possible. Now, obviously, the rest of the agency materials, they were very clear, are 508 compliant. It's just the volume of materials being made available through this proactive disclosure under FOIA are being given basically a waiver.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from any of the rest of the committee members? Questions? Thoughts?
How many agencies total are you going to be meeting with?
Is it about 6?
Yes.
Yes.
And I believe we've talked with 3 so
Yes.
far. 3 to go.
Are you going to identify the agencies at the end of the process?
Sure.
My expectation, yeah.
This is Ginger. I may have missed this, but how did you select the particular agencies? What were the criteria?
This is Sarah. I actually think that in part that might have been done before I joined the committee, so I am not entirely sure how this. I think it was in part due to size and complexity and breadth of different types of requests, but I think it also might have been to some extent more practically where we knew we had good contacts and could more easily get the information that we needed.
As well, this is Sean, as well, agencies we knew had at least a reputation anecdotally of doing something proactive and interesting So, you know, I'm trying to come up with the whole list in my head right now. I don't have it in front of me, but EPA, Department of Homeland Security,
State Department.
State Department, we're three that we're working on, and so those are the kinds of agencies, and we did try and, as Sarah said, mix it up in terms of size. SEC and NARA, thank you. So.
Yeah, this is Tom Sussman. I'd like to, though I usually agree with Sean, I think his characterization of some agencies as sidestepping the compliance requirements is really kind of misses the mark, because they are complying with the requirement for accessibility when not unreasonably burdensome, and looking for and achieving alternatives like posting materials and indicating that on request we will make information available in accessible format, or delaying the accessible but getting the non-accessible form up quickly, and things of that sort, which seem to me to be all variations on the compliance thing. And that's what I think the subcommittee is really quite keen to look at, is you know, how to get the information out there. Agencies are telling us that they see a tension, sometimes a conflict between 508 and FOIA, and so I think that's one of the things we're trying to do, is see if we can come up with you know, some conclusions that will allow the information to be put out there.
Thank you, Tom. I think that I agree with that 100%, that I think that there are perfectly valid waiver mechanisms that agencies can use that allow them to comply with both statutes, and that could very well be useful for a lot of agencies who aren't sure how they can best navigate the two, and I do see that being a significant part of the recommendations, in a way that agencies can, in a completely legal way, comply with both.
So this is Sean. I will amend my original comment to say that they are sidestepping the technical process of making each document accessible and compliant, and not sidestepping compliance, because they have a waiver process, but they basically put off the processing of the documents until such time as they feel they are necessary based on requests.
Lynn Walsh with the Society of Professional Journalists. Just curious, do you have set questions that you're asking these individuals, or is it more of a conversation?
It's both. There are set questions, but then we're taking the conversations where they lead. And I have, let me say, I haven't been involved in every one of the conversations, but that's how because not everyone on the subcommittee is on all of these conversations, maybe 3 people for each one or so. So yes, there are set subjects to cover.
Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Thank you for covering for Margaret. Margaret, I'm sorry if you can hear us, but you can't speak. So I apologize, but I guess we're ready to move on and go on to the subcommittee on searches. They can talk now? Oh, excellent. We just got excellent news. So those on the phone, can you hear me?
There is a delay.
There is a delay.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm just going to rewind and ask you to please introduce yourselves and your affiliation.
Nate Jones, National Security Archive.
James Margaret Quokka. Sorry, go ahead. Margaret Quokka, University of Denver.
James Hirschberg, George Washington University.
Beverly Earlier, Captioner.
Is there anyone else that's on? Oh, and I think Mitra just joined us.
I did. Hi.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. This is Mitra Abdullahi. Is this on? From the American Civil Liberties Union. Hi.
Margaret, since you're now on the phone and we can hear you, is there anything you'd like to add to the great report that Sarah provided us today? Any other thoughts?
No, Sarah, thanks so much for jumping in, and sorry that I was unable to hear you and you were unable to hear me. I'll just confirm, I think this got out there, but the list of agencies we decided to speak with are state, SEC, EPA, NARA, and DHS. And that Sarah's absolutely right that although she may not have been involved in that first conversation where we talked about these agencies, they were largely identified because we were looking for a breadth of type of work or types of records that would be at issue, and also instances in which we had some sort of anecdotal reason to believe that these agencies were engaged in kind of creative and forward-thinking proactive disclosure policies. The two conversations that are fully complete are SEC and DHS, and the others are in various forms of back and forth and setting up. But I'll say that, at least from my perspective, I walked away from each of those conversations being quite impressed in terms of initiatives that these agencies were engaged in toward proactive disclosure. It certainly is true that at both agencies, release to one, release to all is one major component of the proactive disclosure initiatives and something that's taking quite a bit of resources. But both agencies also indicated their responsiveness to current events and current topics of interest as a way to decide when to invest in proactive disclosure. Both agencies, were very frank about the fact that it's largely the same staff that are working on proactive disclosures as responding to requests, so there is a resource trade-off. And as has already been mentioned, each agency had a different way of accommodating the difficulty of 508 compliance by invoking, legal waivers and exceptions where needed, sometimes for a period of time, sometimes upon request, as mentioned before. So I thought actually there was quite a bit of interesting consistency out of the two conversations we've already finished, and we're looking forward to the rest of these conversations for sure. We do have a set template for the kinds of questions we are asking, so I can speak to that a little bit, although of course Sarah's absolutely right that we're engaged in lots of follow-up and kind of taking the conversation where it goes. But our questions fall into kind of the following big categories. One is exploring what kinds of proactive disclosure initiatives the agency has engaged in, what their goals for proactive disclosure are. So, for example, is the goal to reduce the need to make FOIA requests or reduce their volume of FOIA requests, or is it some other goal that they have in mind? And interestingly, actually, it's so far that these two agencies, while they've had the former goal in mind a bit, have actually had other goals in mind as well. We've talked about whether they focus on certain categories of records over others in terms of newly created records or historical records. We've talked about whether they're analyzing their FOIA logs for categories of records that might be good targets for proactive disclosure. We've talked about what staff are involved in proactive disclosure and what kinds of barriers or hurdles that they may have encountered when trying to engage in these initiatives. And then we've had in-depth conversations about 508 compliance, so the processes they use to make documents compliant, when it is they determine they can post a document that has not been remediated and under what circumstances they'll invoke a waiver like that, what personnel are involved in that process, and so looking from the agency's perspective at how that process works, and then any experiences that they've had, kind of trying to balance the two statutes' legal requirements. So those are our kind of major categories of questions that we're looking at. We're also, coming out of this, as has been mentioned, we're really hoping we'll be able to make a set of recommendations about best practices in terms of agencies, when agencies can compliant with both statutes, post records that have not yet been remediated, either because they're in a remediation pipeline or because there's some other waiver, and when it is they need to remediate before records are posted. So we are hoping to really dig into that threshold issue and come up with concrete recommendations for agencies based on what we're learning in these conversations and our own research as well. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that we've had discussions as a committee with the National Archives now about how our subcommittee can maybe kick off some sort of effort to bring together various stakeholders in the 508 process to discuss how the current technical process of remediation is working, and perhaps to try to figure out how we might be able to spur the development of some sort of open source technology that might help lower the burden of remediation. So in those instances where agencies decide they need to or they want to remediate documents before they're posted, trying to lower the burden of that for agencies. So we're in very initial conversations about how this subcommittee might go toward that effort, but I think both pieces of 508, both when records need to be remediated and then also if they're going to be remediated, how to lower that burden are on our radar right now.
Okay. Margaret, thank you very much for all of that. I want to give other folks on the phone the opportunity to ask any additional questions or make any comments about all the great work the subcommittee is doing.
I would just add, this is Jim Hirschberg, that I still think we need to reaffirm the principle that I know Nate shares, that 508 compliance should not be an obstacle to release information. And in cases where the original documentation, especially older documentation, handwritten documentation, things like that, are difficult to make 508 compliant, this should not be an excuse not to release material. And the option of remediation on request, which was mentioned in one of the interviews, is also something that should be in consideration, or at least upon request while further remediation is being investigated, is also an option. But the key principle is that 508 should not be a barrier to release of material.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Anyone else on the phone? All right, anyone else on our committee have any other reactions or questions or comments? Okay. So we're ready to move on to our second subcommittee report on searches. I believe Logan is going to be taking the lead since Nate is on the phone, but at least can speak now, which is great. But before I actually turn to you, I was going to give Melanie Pastay the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker today. He's going to be providing us a presentation that I know is of great interest to this particular subcommittee. So, Melanie, take it away.
I'm obviously very delighted to introduce Doug Hibbard, who's coming down the stairs now. He's a senior advisor on the initial request staff at Office of Information Policy, so responsible for reviewing the processing of FOIA requests that are made to the senior leadership offices of the Department of Justice, so the offices of the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General. So oftentimes very high profile, voluminous, multi-dimensional FOIA requests. And Doug's been with our office since 2001. Of course, I can remember when he first came in as an analyst. And he has really seen firsthand the transformation of FOIA from a very paper-oriented process to one where we have emails that we at first processed in paper form. And Doug has really been on the forefront of bringing us forward into the modern age and utilizing e-discovery tools to have technology help us with processing. And so he's, I think, going to be a really great presenter today for how that process works. And without further ado, here's Doug.
He was a little shy initially, but he's coming up now.
Yeah.
No, just trying to get logistics. So thank you, Melanie, for that, and thank you for the committee for inviting me. Many of you I know by name, Mr. Bekesha, Ginger, we've talked before, you might remember. And so it's an honor to be here and to speak on this subject of e-discovery and how it can change things. And like Melanie says, I've been doing this for, well, 15 years now, and a lot has changed in that time. One thing that's changed a lot is I'm no longer doing my redactions with a marker and my photocopier, but this is how it started. This was my technology. We're receiving more and more requests. Over the last 10 years, the Department of Justice has seen its incoming go up 40%. Our office, OIP, in the same time has gone up 75%. So it's more requests, and the requests are more complex. Speaking in general terms, when I started, sometimes a search would just consist of taking a request, going down to where the paper was, various offices, and said, all right, I got a request, who has paper on this? And then photocopying that paper, carrying it back to my office, and then using my little friend to go to town on it. And that was the process for some requests. But requests are becoming more and more complex. Requesters are asking for things in native format. They're asking for texts. They're asking for tweets. They're asking for records in complex computer systems and databases that someone would need a degree in computer science to understand. And I don't have a degree in computer science. And so I have to figure out what this is meaning, what this means. I mean, I heard someone earlier talk about Capstone. I had not heard about Capstone until we got a request on Capstone. And I went to Melanie and said, what is this? And then of course what we see is people making requests for email about all of this. And when I look at requests, and really the dividing line I see, the simple dividing line between a request that might have 50 potentially responsive documents and one that might have 50,000, really that line comes down to email. Because that's what can take a small request and blow it up into a voluminous request quickly, whether or not the requester wants email. And so this is where we can have e-discovery tools to help us out in conducting our search and in working with the requesters on these records, because there is no exemption for email. Been pushing for it, no exemption 10 yet. That's a joke. And so with these e-discovery tools, what I can do is conduct one search across multiple custodians using one set of terms and one set of time frame, and have my tech folks go and search across their email and various computer files they have and locate everything that hits on those terms and that time frame and loading it into a database that is still electronic, that allows me to do further searching against it, that allows me to filter via domain or custodian, or to look for an exact phrase within there, or to look for anything that went to a .com domain as opposed to a .gov domain. And most importantly, it allows me to negotiate with the requester. It allows me to get on the phone and say, your request involves 50,000 emails. You have asked for, quote, all records on, let's say, Guantanamo Bay. And requesters generally ask for all records, and I completely understand why. They don't want to miss anything. That doesn't necessarily mean they really want all records, and I think some of you would agree with that. But you want to catch everything. And so this is where we can use our tools to reach out to the requester and say, all right, I've done a search. I have 50,000 documents, but I can tell you right here and now that 30,000 of them are nothing more than news articles. Do you want those? Many requesters will say, no, that's not what I'm after. Okay, well, right then and there, we've chopped off 60% of the records we found. And then we can talk further, and in real time, talk to the requester and say, so what are you looking for? Guantanamo Bay, we got that far. But do you want records on a specific detainee? Do you want records on health issues there? Do you want records on the closure of Gitmo? What are you looking for? Well, I want records on this one detainee. Great. In real time, I can plug in a search in my database and see how many hits I have on that name. And I can tell the requester, all right, that's 1,000 emails. We started with 50,000, I'm down to 1,000. Is this what you're looking for? And then we can come to an agreement that, yes, that's what I want you to process. Now that all records has gotten from 50,000 down to 1,000, and really it doesn't take much more time than it took me to describe how it works. It's just a matter of getting on the phone and talking to the requester and explaining the process and what we can do with them. And that's the real thing that we can do with this e-discovery stuff, these e-discovery tools. And I want to be clear on this. It is a tool. It is not a solution. This material does not process the records for you. If you get your 50,000 documents down to 1,000, then the agency still has 1,000 documents to go through. There is no e-discovery software I know that processes anything. This is where it takes the agency expertise to step in, the agency analysts to do their job, applying an access statute to the records and determining what can and cannot be disclosed. But using the e-discovery tool gets us to that part of the request, that part of the process, much sooner, because we're getting to exactly the heart of what the requester is looking for. Now, there are other limitations with e-discovery tools. First, that initial pull of records, searching the dozens or hundreds of custodians and getting those records into the database does take itself time. It's not instantaneous. I've seen some that have been able to do overnight if they're small and very focused. I've seen others that have taken weeks. That simply is built into the process. Now, that said, it is still a far faster process than what it used to be, which would have been me going down to everyone's computer, sitting there, and searching their email while they were off at another meeting. And so doing that for, say, 12, 15, 100 custodians is not very quick. It takes time, but the e-discovery tool lets me do it very quickly. The e-discovery tools, they don't deduplicate the way I would like them to. They do organize the records, they do put them together, and it's easier to identify duplicates, but what I feel is a duplicate, it does not. Sometimes it does have false hits. By that I mean it will see the Department of Justice icon, logo, or the little Twitter bird and think that's a distinct record. It's not. It just sees the picture and thinks that's a record and counts it as one, but it's not. And it does not handle classified material. For that, I still have my little friend here. But what this all comes down to is, like Melanie said, I've been doing this for 15 years now, and the one thing I know for certain is that this process of submitting FOIA requests and fulfilling FOIA requests works best when it is a symbiotic relationship between the requester and the agency. When we're working together towards fulfilling requests, when I can reach out to you by phone, by email, and basically say, help me help you. Tell me what you want, tell me what you don't want. And with these tools, I can much more quickly identify and give you a volume of, if you ask for this, the volume is that. If you ask for Y, the volume is this. Working together so that we can work together to fulfill these requests. Because one thing I'm sure we can all agree on is that the requests are not going to stop coming in anytime soon. You're not going to stop submitting them. We're not going to stop getting them. And so we are going to struggle to process the requests of today if we are continuing to use the procedures, techniques, and tools of 15 years ago. And with that, I open your questions.
Jill Eggleston. Doug, I'd be interested in knowing at what point in time do you have that conversation with the requester? Is it when the request comes in, or is it after you've done some kind of preliminary search and have an idea about what the volume is?
It can be both. We would definitely reach out to requesters. I've called requesters 5 minutes after they submitted it and just want to talk about it. It's because I can tell where this is going. I can tell that I'm going to find a lot of what we call Attorney General news clips. They're just collections of news articles every day that the Department of Justice compiles and distributes. Sometimes they're 100 pages each. Most requesters don't want that, and they'll be willing just to say immediately, yes, I don't want that. But in terms of the e-discovery tool, once we have the data, then we'll start looking at it, and maybe we only pulled 8 documents. Okay, that's not hard. But if we have 20, 30, 50,000, that's when we're going to take a preliminary review of those documents, see what's in that pull, and then start identifying categories that maybe the requester doesn't want. And then call them up and say, I've identified these categories. Do you want news clips? Do you want records about, hey, Can you do the meeting at 10? No, not 10. What about 10:30? 10:30 works for me, okay, but I can't do that. What about Wednesday? Stuff like that. We've also had success in talking to requesters and say, if we provide you with the final, what we find in our records, our e-discovery records, are a lot of drafts of a letter. If we provide you with the final version of that, do you want all the emails that led up to it? Some requesters are willing to say, nope, as long as you give me the final, I don't care how it got made. Some requesters are, yes, that is information I'm interested in, but that gives us categories to reach out to them and say, do you want this? And give them the option to say yay or nay.
One other question. So do you use the tool primarily on emails, or do you have a large portion of electronic records that are not emails?
It's largely emails, but it will also search shared drives. So our shared drives. It will not search, we do have a separate official records depository database. It doesn't search that, but that is something that we already have access to, and we can search immediately upon receipt of request. So that was never an issue. That's always been something we've been able to search like that. It's faster than the e-discovery tool in terms of finding that official correspondence. And that's something we sometimes offer up to a requester. I can search this one database of official correspondence, find these records today, and probably get a response to you within the statutory time limit. If you want email, whether or not I can meet the statutory time limit is, it's going to be pushing it. And probably not, because of the time it takes to do this searching, and then the volume of records I might come across. And so we offer that as sort of option A, option B. Which way do you want to go, requester?
Thank you.
This is David Pritzker. You've described what sounds to me like a very sensible way of processing a request that could be huge to find out exactly what it is that this requester wants. My question is, how do you apply the principle of release to one is released to all? Do you simply post on a website or elsewhere precisely what has been filtered out to respond to this requester so that someone else who sees this and has an interest in the same area will know precisely what he or she is getting? Or do you document in some way what the search was so that if someone else has a related question, related request, but not exactly the same interest, you don't have to go through the same process again?
Yeah, I'm going to actually pass that on to Melanie.
Yeah, it's really sort of two separate things, David. So release to one, release to all is designed to proactively make available to everyone the final documents that have been processed for release. So they're necessarily going to be, it's dependent on what each requester asked for. But our hope with the concept of release to one, release to all is that the more documents that are out there that are already FOIA processed, that for some people at least, they'll be able to say, this is perfect. Here's 3 sets of documents already processed. I don't need to make a request. I've got them instantaneously. So the big advantage, of course, is that there they are sitting on the website. To the extent that requesters look at those 3 sets of documents and go, well, actually, I see it's really, this is on Gitmo, but it's on one detainee, and I really wanted things about Gitmo closure. Well, then they'll make a request. But that over time, of course, well, our hope with this whole the concept is that over time you start building and building a repository of things that have been processed.
So does that mean that there's no effort to accompany the material that's being released by any statement of exactly what it is, why this group is selected?
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, of course, it's very much up to how much time the agency wants to put to creating or accompanying explanatory material to the posting. We just heard from the Proactive Disclosure Committee. We are already so challenged. We have a lot of challenges with posting because it's obviously so it's frustrating to all of us that we want to get things up on the website, especially when they've already been FOIA processed. But we have legal obligations that we have to comply with in addition to FOIA. And then also, the more time you spend creating material to accompany a proactive disclosure, then we have to worry about resources being diverted to that and away from FOIA requests. So my short answer to that is that at this point, I would say to agencies, they're free to put as much or as little explanatory information as they want. Certainly a general, we would want some minimum level of description so that it's helpful to somebody looking at the website. This also, there's just so many points to this. I'll just make one last point. The searchability and of proactively disclosed records is really also tied into. I'm going to ruin my own surprise announcement. Okay, so I won't say anything further. Okay, I'll wait. There's a teaser. I'll finish that sentence at the end of the meeting.
Let me ask a variation on David's question, Tom Sussman. To what extent do you disclose to the requester the keywords, search parameters, formulas, algorithms, things of that sort that you use in your e-discovery? And I guess for some of us requesters who may not be tech savvy, do you talk to our e-discovery experts or will you talk to ours on the other side for a sophisticated requester so that they understand what you're doing? Because obviously, if you use the wrong synonym, you could miss something depending on the sophistication of your software. So, I mean, I'm just wondering how transparent is that process?
Yeah, well, the initial poll, generally, when we submit it to our tech people to have them search, we will come up with terms ourselves generally. And we'll do that based off our knowledge of the records. But if I'm then talking to a requester and they ask me, what term did you use? I'm more than willing to tell them how I found these records, because basically if the request were to go into litigation, I'd have to attest to those terms anyway. I can't hide that, so why would I not tell you? And then, of course, like I said, when I have a requester on the phone, really, it's sort of like, you give me the term, and I'll run it, and I'll see what pops up. And we can just keep throwing terms at it until we start getting to what you want. And so really, that's the relationship, the conversation we're having back and forth. So yeah, I do my initial poll, I find records, and generally, when we do this initial poll, we will go broad to make sure that we try to catch as much as possible. So knowing that we can do this secondary searching, knowing we can call you and discuss it further and drill it down to more terms that are really what you want. And so that's a conversation we'll make very transparent, you know, because we want you to understand the process and we want to work with you to get to the records you want so that we're not spending our resources processing records you don't want.
And can I ask Melanie, to what extent is this process, which seems to be sophisticated and open and interactive, something that you are pushing out to all agencies?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely encourage this for all agencies, and it's part of like our best, we've had best practices on this, and it's, as Doug said, it's the collaboration is just really, really helpful. And also, obviously, having the tools in the first instance is a big part of it. The other thing is, though, it's I think it always, a lot of times these issues come down to the greater understanding there is between the requester and the agency. It just makes the process go more smoothly. They understand sort of what the agency has, what it's found, and it just makes it better.
Hi, Doug. This is Chris Knox. Thank you for the presentation on search. I'd like to add that if you think about what these tools are used for, they're used for litigation support and the discovery process. And that workflow is almost exactly the same as the FOIA workflow. There's an opposing party that makes a request, which you have to go and search for all correspondence from this date to this date with these topics, which is where the search comes in. But you mentioned that agency personnel need to look at all 1,000 of those emails that came out, which is absolutely correct. But these tools can also amplify those personnel in highlighting specific content in there that they need to take a look at, potentially predicting the PII, PHI type information that's in there. If you see 3 numbers, -2 numbers, -4 numbers, it will highlight that and say this is potentially a Social Security number. So yes, agency personnel need to look at every 1,000 of those emails, but they can do it in such a way that they can do it much faster than they were able to do it previously. The tools are starting to learn that the makers of the tools are starting to learn that the FOIA market looks a lot like the litigation discovery market, and they're starting to put FOIA workflows into the tools. The market just hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah, and that's actually how we learned about e-discovery. We learned about it from our civil discovery, our civil division. They say, hey, we got this tool. And they described it to us, and they said, well, that sounds pretty much like a FOIA search. And yes, it wasn't built for FOIA, but you just change the interface some, and it works. It does what we need to do. And yes, it will identify PII. It will help and redact it. It will help identify if we have like an email address that we need to redact. We can say redact this every time you see it, and it will catch that kind of stuff. But yeah, getting to the substantive of the context of the email, that's where agency personnel earn their pay.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about it, attorneys use the tools to look for privileged information, which is much like the exemptions that take a subject matter expert to actually review it. But it's the grouping by content that speeds that process up considerably.
Hi, Stephanie Carr. Thanks, Doug. I just have a pretty basic question. I'm just wondering how it really works. Is it a tool that's on the desktops of all of the action officers, or?
It's web-based. It's web-based for ours. And so we get a request comes in the door, I fill out a form with the custodians and the terms I want used and the dateline, and I give it to my tech people. They go off, do their magic. I don't know what. It happens. And then at some point later, they say, all right, everything that you wanted is in the database. And then I just go on to the web page, basically, which I can access. Well, I brought my laptop with me. If there's Wi-Fi in here, I could access it right now. I'm not going to do that. But I could do that. And it's all right there on the web, on my web page. And then I go through the records and take it from there. But no, the only thing that had to be installed, per se, on my computer is a viewer. That was just a matter so I could see the records and apply redactions to them if I wanted to, but that was it, a viewer.
Michael Bekesher from Judicial Watch. So what's the cost?
That, I don't know. Because like I said, we first learned about this from our civil discovery, and then we learned about it also from our Justice Management Division, who is basically our administrative arm of the Department of Justice. And they said, well, we have a similar thing that we have procured as an enterprise solution. And so I don't know what the cost is. Thankfully, that was not something we were deeply involved in. We were able to work with them in terms of using it. And so it was not something we OIP actively went out and procured.
This is Ginger, is that an answer, Melanie or Doug, that you think that you could come up with and report back to the committee on?
I can certainly reach out and see how much JMD spent to get that one system, and probably ask Civil how much they spend on theirs too.
Great.
Well, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Can I add to that? Because it's possible, if you reach out to your legal folks, it's possible they already have the tool in-house that you can leverage it.
Yeah, that was the thing. We didn't even know it existed, but it was already in-house. We had it. We just didn't know we had it.
Lynn Walsh, the Society of Professional Journalists, and this may be more a question for Melanie or the committee, but are we aware of any agencies that maybe do not have this capability currently or have it and are not using it?
We've asked agencies to report on the different tools, and in Chief FOIA Officer reports for kind of the last several years, we've been asking agencies to give reports on what tools they have, challenges to getting tools, that kind of thing. So definitely, that's where we could look to actually like sort of get a breakdown. Anyone could look, and obviously the search committee could, that would be a really good place for data from all 100, I think we're up to 119 agencies now subject to the FOIA. To see what agencies what agencies are using the tools and what challenges they have. Definitely some agencies report that they don't have these more sophisticated tools. We do have a decent amount of agencies, though, that get, less than 100 requests a year. And they're probably agencies that don't do much litigation, so it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them. I mean, we're talking, You know, obviously at the Justice Department, we have over 70,000 requests every year, so it is an easy case to make for DOJ to have it. So obviously, there's going to be those different factors as well.
And this is Logan. Just to follow up on that, we had discussed at the subcommittee we're looking at the feasibility of doing a data call to all the agencies through the Chief FOIA Officers Council or some other mechanism to get that data, because we couldn't find it and we don't know that it exists elsewhere. We'll be starting shortly, I'll put it that way, our process of putting together our questions for the Chief FOIA Officer report for next year. And I'm looking, we usually have a preview of our assessment from the year before and invite people to come in and give us suggestions for things they'd like us to ask in the Chief FOIA Officer reports for next year. So I flag that for people. We'll make a note of this as another area for questions under our technology section. We always ask questions about technology, and we can ask more targeted questions on this. So we'd be happy to hear suggestions for things you'd like in that report.
Just one other question. This is Sean Moulton with Pogo. Has there been any tensions or difficulties with the program staff in terms of concerns about privacy and allowing? I know that's one of the things we've heard is that program staff aren't comfortable with allowing FOIA officers or other parts of the agency to simply be able to kind of do a call on their emails and see what they want to be the ones who are the custodians and the gatekeeper to their emails. Has that been an issue?
It certainly was. It's certainly been something that was raised, and it's and obviously you have to be very careful, and FOIA officers are very mindful of their responsibility to safeguard information, and clearly you're looking at things that are sensitive and on many different levels. So I wouldn't be surprised that would be an issue that was raised, but we have managed to, because I think we have such a long-standing relationship with these officials in these offices, we have worked it, that's how we do it. And ultimately, I mean, sort of the selling point for it is that it's so much more efficient, obviously, and I think we talked about this last meeting, that to the greater extent you can have searches in the control of the FOIA officials, because it's our job to do it, as opposed to tasking it out to someone else to have to do who has 20 other things to do. It's much more efficient, and it does take one thing off their plate. But they have to feel very, very comfortable that you're going to be treat that material very carefully, and that you have procedures to do that. But so we've been able to do it, and I think lots of agencies are. But it's not an unreasonable concern. So it's just a matter of sort of working it to give people comfort.
This is Chris Knox. Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
For those agencies that are migrating to the cloud or have already migrated to the cloud, a lot of the tools, a lot of the cloud hosting email providers actually incorporate these tools in the platform itself. So you should also look into that.
Logan, I had a quick follow-up for Doug, and my question was whether there's any consultation with the subject matter experts when the request comes in at your agency, because there might be a list of keywords you and the requester come up with that may not capture what the actual records are, because things can be referred to differently, or there may be a shortcut or some acronym or something that folks didn't realize, and I just want to know how you guys handled that with the technology.
There can be. We like to do what we call dynamic searching, which is we'll do an initial search, and like I said, we'll usually use a broad term. And then when we go through the records, we might realize, oh wait, they start referring to it by something else. I'll give you an example. We had a request years ago about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And so we searched for records on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and we used Mohammed in other variations, but obviously that's a common name. And then we started seeing records that we got from a different source, we got from a paper source, and we said, the name Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is nowhere in these records, but it is responsive, it is about him. How is this true? And then we realized it's a long name. Everyone refers to him as KSM. And so we said, we need to do more searching. We need to go back and search using the term KSM, because that's how people refer to him. That's how we do these records. So it's not a static one-off search where I plug in my terms and then I call you on the phone. It's dynamic, it's going back, it's searching more, it's being flexible and changing the process so that we are getting to the records that are responsive to your request as soon as possible. Yes, and sometimes it is a matter of talking to the records custodians themselves and saying, yeah, I was all over this topic. This is what I did for 6 months, and we refer to the committee as this, or I refer to it as that, or it's in this folder. So yes, that's all information we take in to make sure we're conducting an adequate search. But part of it is having that dynamic process of constantly evolving our searching and not just saying, well, we did a search and that's what you get.
I actually have a question that I'm curious about. This is Alina. How much do you still find that you're knocking on office doors to get paper copies of things that are responsive, of items that are responsive?
Much less. In part because everyone does things these days electronically. It's just more efficient. We now process our FOIA requests electronically. We stopped buying red folders. Everything used to be in a red folder. We stopped doing that years ago. There's still some hanging out, but that's it. But so, and like Melanie was saying, a lot of it comes down to efficiency. It's us being able to conduct that search without having to interfere with the records custodian, without having to say, I need to take time out of your busy day to come down to your office and start flipping through your files, because everything's electronic. If someone says, I have paper on this, I have actual paper in my file cabinet, then by all means, yes, we're going to go down there and get those records. Same thing with classified material. We're going to go through that process. But more and more people are just doing things electronically via email, via their computer, and we can search that remotely with these e-discovery tools.
Are the e-discovery tools ever accessing Privacy Act protected systems of records? And if so, did you need to publish a new SORN when you obtained these tools?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, I wasn't involved in the obtaining of the tools. So I mean, the procurement happened long before I got involved with it.
Anyone on the phone who would like to ask questions? We didn't forget about you.
Nate Jones. Hello?
Yes. Nate, go ahead.
Sure. Pretty simple question. Do these e-discovery tools find documents that would have been missed without them? So if someone did a search without these tools, they might give a no documents response. But do these tools ever turn up the search where records that are then found?
I have no way to either confirm nor deny that one, basically. I don't know, because I've not had any instances where it's like, oh, there was something, and so I don't have an answer to that one. Sorry. Yeah.
Anyone else on the phone? Questions? Comments?
Yes. Hi, this is Raynell Lazier from CFPB. I was wondering if you mind letting us know which e-discovery tool you're using. It seems like you're pretty comfortable with it.
Well, I've used 3 over the years. I've used Relativity, I've used Clearwell, and I've used Concordance. But I did a Google search this morning and found a web page that listed 85 of them. So there's a lot out there. Those are the 3 I've used. They've all basically do the same thing, different bells and whistles, different interfaces, but they all do the job.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the phone? Questions or comments? All right. I think we can give you a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Doug. So, Logan, I'm going to turn back to you and Nate. I don't know which one of you is going to give us a summary but I know you guys have been very busy in your subcommittee, so if you could share with us what you've been doing, that would be great.
Sure, this is Logan, and I'll start us off, and Nate can correct everything that's wrong that I'm about to tell you. So, subcommittee met a few weeks ago, and first thing we wanted to do was obviously bring in OIP today and give the wonderful technology presentation, because we wanted to highlight that there are solutions out there, and that this is one of the ways that we think the search process can be improved. One of the things that we included in everyone's materials today was Nate at National Security Archive and Project on Government Oversight conducted a survey on FOIA search, and they surveyed some of the government agencies and the public, and the results are there, and we wanted everyone to kind of be able to see that. And one of our main takeaways on the subcommittee from the survey was that there's a lack of access to technology and there's inefficiency created by that. I mean, I think we all knew that, but kind of previewing that and then with the presentation today, there are ways to improve it. And one of the goals that the subcommittee has established is to kind of, before the end of the term, make recommendations to agencies. There's no one-size-fits-all, but we want to come up with best practices and kind of highlight some of the available technology options. And we first think we need to survey agencies, maybe talk to industry, talk to further agencies that have implemented technological solutions, and come up with best practices that can be adopted from maybe a small 100-person agency to a large 100,000-person agency. So that's something that the subcommittee is going to continue to work on. I think we discussed possibly doing that through case studies as well. And we may also invite industry or agencies to come back and present at future subcommittee or full committee meetings so that everyone can have the full benefit of that. I think at this point I can turn over to Nate and see if Nate has anything additional to add, or any of the subcommittee members.
Sure, this is Nate Jones. Thanks, Logan. You pretty much hit it all, but I would just add two other things that I think that we tentatively agree on and will look towards. And one is parallel to an OGIS recommendation that I think still hasn't been fully fulfilled, and that's the recommendation to build in FOIA with pretty much all technology that you buy. So Doug mentioned that most email in the cloud, and Chris mentioned searches for FOIA, but I think our survey showed that lots of agencies don't have this, aren't using it, so they should. So that's point one. And then point two is the larger point that I think we all maybe suspected, but now we have at least some body of proof from FOIA processors that answered and requesters that search is a huge bottleneck in the FOIA process. And if we're actually worried about lessening these year-long delays in FOIA requests, which I certainly am, a primary or the primary way to fix these delays is fixing search. And I suspect, I'm speaking for myself, not the results of the survey, I suspect that the way to do this is to give FOIA processors more search responsibility and less for the subject matter experts, which it appears to me often take a very long time because they're busy with other things. So those are my 2 points. One, build in FOIA when buy technology. Two, fix the bottleneck. And I think we have proof now that search is a or the bottleneck.
Logan, anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
We should also mention for our audience that the survey results that the National Security Archive has posted on their website. Help me out, Nate, please. Website URL is
nsarchive.org.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
nsarchive.org.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments, questions? Jill.
This is Jill. One thing that I wanted to add to Nate and Logan's report, the other thing that the subcommittee talked about is perhaps a recommendation either from OGIS or OIP about the necessity of building accountability into performance standards for our program offices. So the individuals that we rely on to complete these searches, if part of their performance was evaluated based upon how responsive they are to FOIA requests, I think we'd see an increase in cooperation.
Now we have, this is Melanie, we, at DOJ last year, we developed performance standards for non-FOIA professionals, so exactly addressing that exact point. And we blogged about it and put the material on our website.
Because we do think it's really important and helpful. And within DOJ, those standards that have been incorporated throughout the department for non-FOIA professionals, because obviously lots of times FOIA professionals do rely on subject matter experts to help. So we made that material available, and the Associate Attorney General sent out a memo to all the agencies encouraging them to adopt those standards or incorporate those kind of standards into their own performance evaluation. So there's a lot of work that's been done on that, and you can just look right at our website to get the materials.
Okay. I think, thank you very much for all of that. Nate and Logan, I know you've been doing a lot of great work. Thank you to all the other subcommittee members. Again, if you want to join the subcommittee, I'm sure they'll still welcome you with open arms. So I know we're running ahead of schedule, but I think it's a good idea to take a short break, comfort break, if you will. Just again, a reminder that restrooms right outside of the theater, as well as on the first floor, on the ground floor where the Charters Cafe is. Earlier I was told the Charters Cafe was closed in the morning. I'm hopeful perhaps they are open now. No?
I'm getting a signal no.
Oh, no. So I can't invite anyone to go to the Charters Cafe. But you can go to the restrooms. So why don't we adjourn, and why don't we all come back by 11:25? All right, I think everyone is back. Thank you, everyone, for coming back on a timely fashion. Folks on the phone, are you back on?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I only heard, is Nate still on? Jim? We've lost them. Okay. They know how to call in, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Was the Charters Cafe closed? Can someone confirm that? I'm sorry. Did not plan that well either. We'll work on that for next time. We're now going to turn to our last subcommittee, last but not least, efficiencies and resources. And they happen to be sitting right next to each other, perfectly arranged by Amy. Co-chairs Ginger McCall and Chris Knox are going to provide us with your updates, activities, what you've been up to, and open it up to comments from the committee. Thank you.
Great, this is Ginger. So our subcommittee agreed on a somewhat aggressive schedule of bi-weekly meetings and check-ins because we're hoping to be able to move forward relatively quickly with our project. Sean, thank you, Sean, so much for compiling the statistics. With the use of the statistics that Sean compiled from the annual FOIA reports, we identified several agencies of particular interest. We picked 5 large agencies and 5 medium agencies. We defined large as receiving 10,000 or more requests per year, medium as between 500 and 10,000 requests, and small as less than 500 requests per year. So the 5 large agencies that we saw that we were interested in were OPM, Treasury, EPA, DHS, and DOL. And our 5 medium agencies that we'll be focusing on are Department of Interior, PBGC, U.S.C., NASA, and FTC. Don't ask me what some of those abbreviations stand for because I don't remember. I know DOL. So we are going to be looking at those agencies, and we thought particularly for the large agencies that it would be helpful to also maybe consider focusing on certain components within those agencies. So in our meeting 2 meetings ago, we volunteered to look at particular agencies and to identify components of interest in those agencies, in those large agencies, and then to move on from there. So yesterday we spoke about that assignment, and we had identified successfully several components within the agencies. I know at Department of Labor we're particularly interested in OSHA and in wage hour division because those components process a particularly large volume of requests. Interior, it's the Fish and Wildlife Service, which when I did my evaluation of the components of that agency came up as pretty excellent across the board. We were looking in particular at number of requests that were processed per full-time employee hour. We looked at number of requests that were processed per dollar, and we also looked at what agencies had the largest percentage of complex requests and then processed those requests successfully because those are the more time-consuming requests. So we were looking not only at number of requests received and processed, but also the complexity of those requests. And we did identify several other components within other agencies that we thought were particularly interesting. The EPA, I think it was Region 2 that we discussed, had a particularly large volume of requests and interesting processing times and use of resources for those requests. And we decided we would also look at the headquarters of EPA. And then for some of the other agencies, we're still evaluating which components we'd like to focus on. So the next step of our project is that we're hoping to reach out to those agencies and components to interview people within those offices to get at the sort of data that we can't necessarily get at just by looking at the numbers or even by looking at the Chief FOIA officer reports, which was another thing that we had looked at recently. So right now we're working on brainstorming questions that we'd like to follow up and ask those agencies. The members of the subcommittee are going to be working on those questions, but we would welcome your input for questions that you think would be meaningful, questions particularly that get at backlog issues or efficiency issues or resource use issues would be very helpful. So that is the next step, and our next subcommittee meeting is set for 2 weeks from yesterday. I think that's May 3rd, right? May 3rd at 4 p.m. We'll be doing the phone call for that meeting. And if you have any suggestions, feel free to email them to myself and the co-chair Chris, and please make sure that you CC Amy at OGIS.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris, anything you want to add?
No, that was an excellent summary.
Okay.
We want to thank Sean for pulling all the numbers together. He not only pulled it together for the parent agencies, but then went back through for the components as well. So thank you.
And I'll thank Melanie for having all the data up on FOIA.gov and making it so much easier.
And I'll thank the compliance team for doing all the hard work of getting that data ready for FOIA.gov.
Great. Any other subcommittee members want to chime in? Talk about anything that you've been looking at? Okay. Anyone on the phone? Okay. It's all quiet on the Western Front. All right.
We would welcome new additions to our subcommittee.
Yes.
If anyone would like to volunteer.
There you go. There was another pitch. How many members do you have currently?
It's probably about 6, maybe 7.
great.
And each one of us, I think, took 2 parent agencies. So there's plenty to go around if anybody wants to help out.
Also, if you're on the subcommittee and you weren't on the call yesterday, feel free to email us and let us know what the results of your inspection of the components were.
Thank you, Ginger. All right, anyone else on this subcommittee, efficiencies and resources? All right, thank you very much for that report. So we are just rolling right through our agenda today. We're definitely going to get out early. I will not stand between you and lunch for sure. I want to make sure that no one else on the phone or any of our committee members here have any comments or anything else they want to report out or talk about today. So I want to give that opportunity.
I do have something, yes.
And I'm going to open that up. We have Melanie, please.
Okay. I started to blow my own scoop a little bit earlier, although it's not really literally a scoop because we announced this yesterday in our on FOIA post. But we obviously are just delighted that we have joined forces with 18F, the tech-savvy experts at GSA, to work on the consolidated, or what we're now calling the National FOIA Portal, because the whole idea of it is that it's a web portal that allows an individual to make a request to any agency, and that obviously we hope will have many other additional features to help the FOIA process. So we have been working with OMB as this was part of a cross-agency priority goal, a CAP goal. And through that engagement, we did secure initial funding for the project, which was, of course, a really key, big aspect of the work that we're doing. And we have signed all our agreements with 18F. And the big thing that we want to emphasize and that I want to invite everyone to do is to participate in it, because for those of you who know about 18F, the whole way they work is we don't sit in a dark room and come up with requirements and say, build it, sort of the way contracting used to be in the past. The whole idea here is to have this iterative open process where 18F and our office, obviously, and we'll sit down and work with and listen to, really most importantly, listen to the views of agency representatives and requesters to figure out the best things that we could have the portal do. What are the biggest needs, and how feasible are the solutions that we could bring to bear to those needs? So the whole process is very open, it's very dynamic, and we have set up a dedicated email box, national.foiaportal@usdoj.gov, and it's on our blog post. So please just email. Now we actually email if you'd like to be involved in the process, giving comments and getting updates on how we're going. We already had, we put the blog up yesterday afternoon, and we have already, I think, about 15 people who have signed up that anxious to participate, and of course we're delighted to have people, as many people are interested in doing it. So that's my news, and I guess to tie it back to what I was starting to say before in terms of proactive disclosures, part of a possible feature of the portal, and obviously the portal we're going to have to build slowly and grow and add features over time. But part of a logical feature for the portal would be the ability to find things that are already posted. So that all ties in with proactive disclosure efforts that are underway. We've said all along that it's great to post things, but then we need to have the public be able to find what's posted, or else it doesn't really get us anywhere and doesn't advance the ball. So it's just it's an obvious aspect that we will certainly be looking at as part of the portal process.
Lynn Walsh, the Society of Professional Journalists. I know you've talked about funding a couple times. Is there any way you can tell us how much the cost of this, what the cost is?
So the funding that we secured with OMB's help was $1.3 million. So I don't know if that sounds good. We're happy, obviously, with that amount. We know, though, that is what will help us start the initial project, and that certainly we're going to need more money going forward to maintain the portal. So we're going to be continuing to work with OMB for additional funding sources. But we did get $1.3 million. Yeah. Yes.
Is your invitation for participation addressed to both government employees and others?
And requesters, yes. Yes, both. Because we've been saying all along, the portal has to work for both sides of the FOIA process. And we want it to be, we don't want to just open a fire hose, and so it's really, really easy to make requests willy-nilly, and requesters are like, good, I fell asleep and I made a request. And that doesn't help FOIA. So the whole idea here is to have the portal help requesters go to the right agency. Ideally, even before that, help requesters find things that are already posted, so they don't need to make a FOIA request. And then help agencies be able to have more help agencies be able to handle the request, intake the requests more readily, group them, that kind of thing. But we're really our approach here is to be very open-ended and have a real fulsome discovery phase. That's the terminology that we use, where we really talk about all these things that we could do and figure out what is the best way to do it. So we're very excited, as you can tell.
Any other comments? Folks on the phone, anyone want to comment or a question that you want to throw out at this point? Do we have anyone on the phone?
Yeah.
They found coffee.
They found coffee.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I know we're doing a lot of work, and I very much, again, appreciate everything everyone is doing. And just keep up all the good work. Amy is here to help. I'm happy to help as well, although Amy is much more helpful than I am. And is there anything else I should add, Amy, before we move on to public comments? Okay. So at this point, I want to turn our attention to public comments, opportunity to give members of the audience an opportunity to make comments. We've usually allotted about 15 minutes, so maybe we could just take it right before noon, so we can get out of here early. If you have any comments, please approach the microphones on each side. I think they actually are up and running now. So Cal, thank you very much for your help earlier. We're okay now. Please state your name and your affiliation if appropriate. No pressure.
I'll go first. Cal McClanahan, National Security Counselors, FOIA attorney and requester. I have a question and an observation for the search subcommittee. That something that I have been recently running into with a lot of agencies is how they interpret a request for email requests. And I can just give you some simple numbers. As part of a project for one of my clients a couple weeks ago, I submitted a request to 12 different agencies saying, we want all emails to and from this person, you know, the director of your office or something like that, for the last 10 days. And that was the end of the request, because my client wanted all the emails. He didn't want emails about something, he just wanted to, you know, see what kind of emails were going on. And we got back about an even split of responses. And the one half of the split is what I want to draw to your attention. Half of them said, would call me or email me or send me a letter saying, can you give us something to narrow this? And I said, I'm sorry, no, really, that this is just for all emails. And they said, okay, great, thanks. And that was the end of it, and they processed the request. The other half sent me a letter saying, unless you provide more information, such as the recipient or the sender or the subject, this is not a proper request, and if you do not respond within 10 days, we will close your request. That is wrong in so many different ways. The first problem is that, no, it's not a wrong request just because it asks for all emails in an account. But the second part is, we interpret it this way, and if you don't respond, we are administratively closing your request. We're not denying it. We're not refusing to accept it. It's this administrative closure thing that doesn't seem to be based in any statute language. But they're doing it, and they're imposing on requesters. I have to believe I'm not the only requester this has happened to. I'm just maybe the only one who knows enough about it to fight them on it, saying, if you don't give us this, then too bad, you don't get to make a request. And I think that when y'all are addressing searching and email, y'all should look to, you know, what happens when someone asks for emails that are not narrowly described. Do you just ask for clarification, but if they don't, you know, okay, it's going to be a long request, or do you say, too bad, too sad, you don't do it our way, you don't get to make a request?
Cal, would you, my compliance team would be happy to look into this for you. If you want to talk to, you know, I would really be interested to see like actually the letters that you got, and we can look into it for you as a topic, just for the, you know, actually sort of see what you got exactly and just look into it.
Are you talking about an OIP compliance team or
Yeah. Yeah, I mean my OIP compliance team. They just happen to be sitting right behind you there.
Is there a publicly available email address where someone can send something to that?
Yes, and you can actually, yeah, just write. He's getting up right now. You can, and you definitely can just send it to our OIP email address, or just talk to Bobby right now.
Jason Barron, I'm at Drinker Biddle and formerly at the National Archives as Director of Litigation. I am extremely heartened that this committee has a search subcommittee and that you have heard Mr. Hibbard today. I think search is an extremely important issue, and I think Doug Hibbard hit it exactly on the head, that email explodes FOIA requests. In the future, texts will as well, texts and social media and other forms of shared collaboration. But email is still the 800-pound gorilla in this area, and it does mean exponential increases in volume. I knew as early as 2002 that there was a problem with keyword searching when I searched the NARA presidential email database of 20 million emails using 12 keywords. We got 200,000 hits. This is in the U.S. versus Philip Morris et al. RICO case involving tobacco, case that I believe is still going on. So in 2002, we searched 20 million presidential emails with 12 keywords. We found 200,000 hits, 100,000 of which, 50% of which, were false positives. They were noise. They were like policies about smoking in the bathroom, or Upper Marlboro, Maryland, or or other forms that, or people's names that were aligned with the terms that were used. And so it was very clear to me 15 years ago that keyword searching is an excellent tool as compared with manual searching, but it wasn't good enough for large volumes. Now with Capstone and with the archivist directive, not only for email to be kept in electronic form in 2016, but all permanently appraised electronic records, or records, have to be in electronic form going forward after 2019 to be accessioned into the archives. It's driving a large collections of records in electronic form, email, via Capstone, and other forms of electronic records. And when you're at 1 million and more records, which many agencies will be at via Capstone, keyword searching is better than manual, but it isn't the state of the art in e-discovery. In my firm and in other leading firms in this area, e-discovery practitioners use predictive coding. They use technology-assisted review, and I urge the members of this committee, and particularly the search committee, to look up predictive coding and technology-assisted review. There's a book that the ABA published called Perspectives on Predictive Coding that I edited. I get no royalties. That is really a primer on this. Every agency and every FOIA officer, every CIO should understand that there's a big difference between searching 1 million or 10 million or whatever the number is, or even 75,000, using records using keywords, because the keywords will just give you a list. And Doug was exactly right. Then you have to, the tool doesn't provide the processing. But if you use predictive coding, you essentially get software to show you the best and most relevant documents in a ranked list. So the 1 million documents are ranked from most responsive to least responsive. That means a tremendous efficiency in FOIA, because you can cut down having to look on a manual basis through the keyword hits and eliminate false positives, and really hone in on a small portion of records that are high on the ranked list, and perhaps give an early interim response to FOIA requesters if the rest of the request is going to take years. So I urge this committee, and particularly the subcommittee, to think about reporting out to the government on these kind of tools. Allison Stanton at Justice is someone, Melanie, you know well. She is one of the various DOJ experts in the area. There is a federal e-discovery working group of hundreds of e-discovery attorneys that I used to be invited to. They have a B5 process, so they don't invite outsiders anymore. I would urge some kind of outreach to learn what are best practices, because every large agency is going to be in the same soup as the National Archives. The Archives now has more than 500 million emails from the Obama, the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, and others. Other agencies are going to be in that boat, and they need better search tools than just keywords. It's a conversation that this committee should carry forward to advance the purposes of FOIA. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jason. Any other comments? All right, I think we're good. Thank you again, everyone, for coming today. Really appreciate your attention, and you've been a very attentive audience. Committee members, thank you again for all your hard work. And we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Elena.